I'm making a little studio for myself in my garage and I need a good place to store my tools because at the moment they live in a cardboard box which isn't really working out for me. So I want a nice easy way to get to my tools. Unfortunately, I blew all the budget on the paint job and the fancy light down here, so I'm going to have to get a little creative and figure out how to make it all for a grand total of $0. But let's back it up a bit. When you last saw me, the studio was super dark, so what's all this about a fancy light? You all had very good suggestions about the lighting, but I'm actually going to ignore all of them. Actually, a few of you even recommended the same video by Evan Monsma. If you haven't seen his channel, absolutely check it out. I'll leave a link in the description, specifically his video about lighting his studio. It looks so good. Probably going to try and emulate something like that just because I love the vibe of things just being thrown together with scrap bits of wood. So go and check that out. But yeah, I'm going to ignore all of your advice on the lighting because, well, let me just turn something on for you. Basically, for a long time, I've been meaning to get myself a proper film light. I couldn't find one secondhand, so I've had to end up buying one new. It's still much cheaper than getting an electrician out here, so I've decided to go that way instead. It is on a stand at the moment, but what I've also discovered is that you can get a ceiling mountable spigot thing. So I'm gonna pop that up on the roof, which means that most of the time, I think this light will just live on the roof, illuminating the whole space. But if I need to, I can take it down and pop it on the stand and use it as a filming light, which is something that I was meaning to get anyway. So let's get started and put this up on the roof. The ceiling mount came with some concrete bolts, which would do the trick up in here. And I'm sure that you would all love to see me drill into concrete with my little hand drill. But I think what I'm gonna do instead is just use those bolts that are already there and mount the thing to that. Should be much easier than using the hand drill. That's pretty stuck in there. So here's the plan. I'm going to screw this piece onto this block of wood using these beefy screws, and I'm gonna cut this little metal plate thing into a washer that's big enough for this screw and these holes. I thought the days of the screeching saw were behind us, but apparently not. And this is for its intended purpose too. I am also going to do a similar thing through the top here so that hopefully this piece of metal will be very securely attached to this bit of wood. I am then also going to screw this on here, probably using some of these washers out of the bolts that it came with and some screws that I found in this old curry jar here. I then think what will happen is this will be a sandwich like this, and I will, pretending this is the one on the roof, bolt these together. I think given the thickness of the wood, I might have to take a bit off the top here so that this can sit flush so that the bolts line up better. And then I think that should be good enough. The only thing I'm wondering about is maybe attaching these things along like this, just to give it some extra rigidity in this direction. I don't want to modify any of these bracket bits just in case I ever want to put the garage door opener back on. But I think with all of this stuff, I can sort of cobble together something that should keep the light on the roof. Oh my God, this is so cursed. Oh no. Let's go and see if it works. Ooh. It's not pretty, but it's up there. So let's chuck the light up there and see how it goes. Fingers crossed it can hold the weight. We got it. There it is. I think that's good. Hopefully you can see me a bit better now and we can move on to building the tool rack. First things first, I've got to get my hands on some materials. I recently spent a bit of time at my partner's parents' property, say that 3 times fast, and they were kind enough to provide the goods. They had a pile of building offcuts that they let me pick through. A lot of it was pretty rotten and termite infested, but there were a few hidden gems. And they also had a few old pallets that I took apart to take home. One of them had some nice wide boards that you don't typically see in pallets, but it also had another little surprise for me. Whoa, look at that. That's crazy. I don't even know what that is. If you got any idea what is going on in this piece of wood, let me know in the comments. I've never seen that before, but it clearly Clearly makes the wood very weak. It's split the whole way along that line. After eventually getting everything home and letting it dry out, I could give it a bit of a scrub down because this stuff was absolutely filthy. It didn't help that much, but you know, I'm not going to be too fussy about that. Originally, I was just planning on screwing some wood to the wall and chucking my tools up on that, but I've spent so long getting the walls all nice that it felt sacrilegious to immediately drill into them. I also don't really know where I wanted it to hang, so I wanted to come up with a different solution. After staring at the pile of wood for a while, a bit of a plan started to form in my head. The first thing to do was to build a bit of a frame. To do that though, I need a functional bench, but the top's not even secured on, and it's only got one cross brace, so it can still wiggle quite a bit. So we're going to give it some TLC and make it something that will actually be more usable. So let's do that. I don't know if the cross brace should go opposite to the one that's already there or if it should go in the same direction. I mean, if you know, let me know. But my intuition is that it should go opposite. No, because then twisting, it's bracing in the same direction. I don't know, maybe it should go... I think I'm overthinking it. I'm going to go opposite, and if it's wrong, let me know and I'll switch it around. I'm also trying to use up some of the crappier bits of the pallet wood, because I mean, with pallet wood you get like, maybe if you're lucky, 75% of them are like decent and the other ones are just completely cooked. This one has a bit more character, so I'm going to go for this one. With a bit of chopping and some drilling with a trusty hand drill, and with the cacophony of crows in the background, I could screw that cross brace into position. Well, that is significantly more stable now. So that's good. Now we've got to put the top on. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to wing it as usual, and we'll see how it goes. I want to try and avoid putting a screw straight through the top. I tried to roughly line up the base with the top. Good enough. Then I cut myself some little blocks. This is by far the most simple way that I could think of putting these two things together. 1 down, 3 to go. A bit of elbow grease later and we've got a nice sturdy place to work from. On literally the first hole I was drilling, I don't know what I did wrong, but this happened. Shit. I whipped out the pliers and with a bit of surgical precision, I managed to extract the fragments of the drill bit. Thankfully, things went pretty smoothly after that though, just a lot of drilling and screwing until the frame came together. I gave the longer board a bit of a trim and things are starting to take shape. That is one solid piece of wood. And before long, I was left with a pretty solid tabletop. Actually, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I figured I had enough wood to build another bench, which the tool rack will then attach to. Which means I can move it wherever I want in the studio and not have to drill into my wall. I had 4 of these slightly beefier bits of wood from the pallet so I could line them all up and cut them to the same length for the legs. Then a little bit more drilling and a little bit more screwing and I've got myself a very lanky table. The legs are just stupidly spindly, so they'll need a bit of support. I gritted my teeth through a bit more screwing to put some side braces on. I'd been using the screwdrivers so much by this point that I'd managed to get a nice big blister in the middle of my hand. So for the next little bit, I turned to nails instead of screws just to give my poor palm a little bit of a break. And make a little shelf for some extra storage, which would add a little bit of bracing. Hopefully. We'll see how that goes. But with the structure of the bench complete, we can move on to the actual tool rack. I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to go about this. I was debating whether to have a gap in between the slats or not, and I think there are pros and cons to both approaches. With the gaps, it would be really easy to make tool mounts that could hook onto the slat and you could rearrange things really easily, but I think it would make it look a lot like a pallet, which I'm less keen on. Attaching this to the bench turned out to be a lot easier said than done. Firstly, I've got to put a cutout in the tabletop so the vertical struts have something sturdy to attach to. This isn't too hard, just a few quick cuts with the saw and then knocked out and cleaned up with the chisel. And before you know it, I've got some perfect notches. Or at least, they would have been perfect if I'd measured and lined things up properly.
Oh no, that's definitely not going to go.
It was still tight, but it seemed like it was going to work, so I gave it a bit of gentle encouragement with the mallet. But I ended up with it half smacked in, where I couldn't go forwards, and it was very difficult to go backwards.
Shit.
Eventually, I managed to wrestle it out of its death grip, but moving this thing around and getting it into position is probably much easier as a two-person job. But after using everything at my disposal, I managed to get it into place.
Clamps are exactly in the way.
With the way it all lines up, there's a little gap between the legs and the vertical struts, which means it's super wobbly. This is an easy fix though, just screw a little block in so it's nice and secure. The only fun bit about all this drilling and screwing is playing the can you fish the right screw out of the jar game. It's not a bad game if you only have to do it once or twice. Unfortunately though, I was playing it a lot, but on this occasion, I got lucky.
2 in 1. Let's go.
I don't know if you remember this little red lamp from the last video, but as I was building all of this, a little idea was starting to percolate its way through my brain. But first, I got to take it apart.
What? Tell me if you can figure this one out. The 14mm, heaps of slop. I go to the 15, and it's tight. What happened to my 14mm?
Working with my wax spanner, I managed to get the little screw off, letting me rip the light from the base. After figuring out where I wanted it, I could chug through the wood with a step bit in the hand drill, which is always such a wrestle. I think I need to get myself a brace and bit for this sort of thing, but I got there in the end, and that's what matters. And now we've got a lovely little light on the tool rack. But I'm not really sure that adding the light counts as putting up tools though, so let's crack on with that. While hanging out with the members on a live stream, I made a pair of very simple holders for my chisels and screwdrivers. If you want to see the full stream, as well as all the other members-only content, you can become a member with the join button down below and see what other perks you get while you're there. And as always, a massive thank you to the members who so generously helped to make all of this possible. Fishing out a few more screws, I could whack up the new tool holders and get started on putting all my other tools up as well. It always baffles me just how many perfectly good materials get discarded these days. It's almost like we see things only as a whole item and not as the parts they're made up of. Parts that can be dismantled and repurposed to give them a whole new life. Obviously, I was lucky enough to be given these materials by my partner's parents, but it's easy enough to find pallets and other discarded materials just literally lying around. Actually using repurposed materials is undeniably more work. They often need cleaning up and extra prep before they can be used, and you can't always find exactly what you need either, so you've got to put your thinking cap on and figure out how to make it all work, which is something I really enjoy. I also find though that it's incredibly liberating. I'm not as worried about screwing up because I'm just using scraps, and so the stakes are way lower. Making is all about problem solving, and repurposing one thing into another, in my opinion at least, is about as pure as it gets. Because of the unwieldy nature of scrap, there's a real give and take between maker and materials, often ending up with something a little quirky and almost never exactly what you had in mind, but beautiful nonetheless. And in that way, you can transform what most people see as rubbish into, for example, a new bench with a tool rack. Sorry for getting all philosophical on you there, but if that's the sort of thing you enjoy, I highly recommend that you check out Beau Miles' channel. He's got some wonderful insights on building with scrap materials, and he recently just finished up a junk cabin made almost entirely out of things he's scavenged, and it's a great watch, so go and watch that next. This entire bench and tool rack is made with very basic tools and a pile of scrap wood. If you've ever wanted to have a go at building stuff, hopefully this video shows that you really don't need much, either in materials but also in skill, to have a crack. It's honestly so much more achievable than it's often made out to be. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.